recently I decided to mix things up a little and try reading some books that don't have pictures in them. Or, don't have very many pictures other than like some maps or charts or something. And I had been hearing some recommendations for quite some time from a friend of mine by the name of Matt, who's a big fan of Brandon Sanderson and his vast library of works. So, following Christmas and the various gifts and gift cards that come along with that, I decided to get into reading some Sanderson, and it was recommended that I start with Mistborn. So, I bought the first Mistborn book a few days after Christmas, and took an excessively long amount of time to read it. I finished it like a month ago. Recording this now at the end of April. It took me way too long to read that 500-page book. And then I went and read the second and third books within about 2 weeks after that. So, needless to say, I quite liked Mistborn. I quite like the way this Brandon Sanderson fellow writes his books. And I've been talking about it a lot lately, to the point where I'm sure the non-Brandon Sanderson fans in my immediate circle have gotten tired of hearing me talk about it. So here I am recording a video rambling about Mistborn, which is probably going to be really disorganized and not well put together. But if you like hearing people talk about Mistborn, because you like talking about Mistborn, you're probably going to enjoy this video. So I'm going to try to talk about things without spoilers a little bit at first, just kind of talk about the general premise and things I like, and then probably delve more into spoilery things later on. I'll put a little spoiler warning somewhere in the video. And we'll see how long we're here for. Another entry into Misk doesn't know what he's doing with the channel anymore, so he's just doing whatever, which was the original idea for the channel anyway, so, return to form, I guess? Two other things before we start also. I'd like to give a special thanks to my friend Matt for getting me into the books, recommending them, and also gifting me Warbreaker and the first Stormlight Archives book. I greatly appreciate it. I'm now about 10% of the way through Warbreaker. It's been pretty interesting thus far. Depending on how these books hit, I may ramble about these as well. I may also make videos on these. I'll make videos on whatever the hell I want. And the other thing, another special thanks to my friend Fine for providing me with the second and third Mistborn books. I've been a little tight on cash so far this year, and he enabled me to start, to continue reading the trilogy right away, instead of having to wait quite a while to buy them. So, thank you for that as well. Now then, without any further ado, let's talk a bit about these books, shall we? So once again, the original Mistborn Trilogy, Mistborn Era 1, consisting of Mistborn, also known as the Final Empire, the Well of Ascension, and the Hero of Ages. First things first. First thing to get out of the way, non-spoilery section. These books are really good. Sanderson doesn't have, the most complex or impressive style of writing. There are definitely better writers out there when it comes to dialogue and narration. He's very simple for the most part, at least in these books. I don't know how much he changes later on once he's gotten more experience writing. But that is not necessarily a bad thing. It makes the books very easy to read. I read... let's see, it took me about a week to read the second and third book each. So I was reading like over 50 pages a day, which for a person who has school, goes out and does stuff, and also spends most of my time playing games and talking to my friends in voice calls, they were good attention grabbers. I actually waited to do other things so that I could dedicate enough time to read. I didn't do this much with the first book, which was one of the obstacles to me actually dedicating enough time to reading it. But once I got about halfway through it, I really started dedicating a lot of time to reading it. And then, I just kind of burned through it. They're easy reads. If you are not like a big book reader, this is still gonna be something that I would recommend for you. They're not difficult books to get through. They're pretty simple. They're easy to understand. You will enjoy them, especially if you enjoy fantasy. And I gotta say, Sanderson does some damn good fantasy. I really like the world building in these books. I really like the magic systems. I like the way that they are explained, fleshed out, the way they kind of fit into the world. Haze killers are one of the coolest things from a world building perspective. How do people respond to dealing with magical people who can manipulate metal? How does someone defend themselves against this? Well, it's quite simple. Beat them with wooden clubs. Don't have any metal on your person. We have an entire sect of people specialized in using wooden shields and beating people with clubs. It's fascinating. And then there are other world-building aspects I find really interesting. The world of Mistborn, which I don't remember if the actual world on the whole is ever named. It's just the people live in the final empire and it's divided into its dominances. But since ash has coated the landscape, it's a very volcanic world. And plant life is relatively scarce, or it's quite different from the plant life we have. There's not really like a lot of meat eating that happens. Animals, like livestock, are incredibly exotic luxury items, so it's very rare to see people eating meat. I don't think there's a single reference to anyone eating meat in the first book. It's only in the second book, once we are dealing more with like wealthy upper class people who are doing whatever the hell they want. Then we're getting stuff like, yeah, they're serving like a pile of steaks here. This guy's eating like a bunch of chicken wings and stuff. It's only then. And this is never like emphasized. It's just sort of there for you to pick up on that, man, a lot of people are really only ever eating like bread and vegetables most of the time. And I think that's really neat. That is honestly one of my favorite, just like little subtle world building things that I'm very fond of. The other thing I really like when it comes to the world building and the magic system is mystery. There are many questions that are raised throughout the trilogy that over time are answered. Some of the biggest ones are with the little excerpts at the start of each chapter, but then just various other questions that the characters wonder as things go on in the story and they discover things. Some things which answer questions but then raise new ones, and just kind of interconnect that with the world itself. Having that be a very cool tie between learning about how the world works, being revelations that become major plot points for the story. I really like the way those two things are integrated. I suppose I should talk about the characters now, probably. That would be a good idea. Though I don't know how much I can talk about the characters without really getting into the spoilers. I guess the one I can talk about the most would be Vin. I think we're just going to say this is where we start talking about spoilers. We're going to talk about spoilers now. There'll be a big message on the screen. look at it for a few seconds. All right. 10 minutes, I think that's a perfectly reasonable place to start talking about spoilers. Vin is probably my favorite character in this trilogy, which is impressive. It's a thing I've mentioned before when it comes to other things. It's not very often that my favorite character in a story is the main character. When they are, that is always a very good thing. A lot of the time, the main character, they're interesting, but there's usually someone else who gets introduced who has an interesting gimmick or a backstory or a worldview that is just so intriguing. Much more intriguing than the main character, who is often sort of the template, who you then compare other characters to based on how different they are from them. But I think Vin, on her own, is really the most compelling character in the trilogy. I really like her arc over the books. Her having to sort of switch between these two very different lifestyles, these two different personalities almost, and trying to figure out who she really is when living this double life. And eventually realizing that both of these personas are a part of herself, that it's all her, is really good. I really do think the culmination of it, that has to be like one of the best lines I've read in a book, honestly. Just from the way it made me feel. It was realizing, oh yeah, who am I? I'm someone that I like. That is one of the best lines I have ever read of like a character being introspective about themselves. Just having that conclusion to a person's arc. I like myself. I've spent my whole life living in wretchedness, living deceptively, living fearfully. I've never really had an opportunity to explore who I am as a person. And the opportunities that did arise for me to stand on my own, to be my own person, raised a lot of questions for me. It was a very strong internal conflict. And just to have such a simple but personable conclusion to that, I think is fantastic. The other thing I find most interesting about Vin's arc is that it's done by the end of the second book. She has some stuff, like that realization and whatnot. And she obviously has some big character moments in Hero of Ages. But her arc, for the most part, is finished in Well of Ascension. She has decided who she is, what she wants to do, and she sticks to it. And then most of what she does in Hero of Ages is just her as a complete person. She has finished her development, and we basically get just a whole book dedicated to seeing who Vin is after realizing herself. And I think that's really cool. It's nice to see something like that. Oftentimes, when a character finishes their arc, it's right before the story is over. But instead here, we get to see a lot more of that. Some other characters I like. Obviously, Kelsier. Everyone loves Kelsier. He's in Fortnite. They put him in fucking Fortnite because Brandon Sanderson wrote the Infinity Blade novels, which I actually read one of back in, middle school, I think. How weird that I didn't even realize I read one of his books years ago. He's awesome, obviously. I don't know how much more there is to say about him in that regard. He becomes much more interesting kind of later on, once you have the impact of his actions, and also him obviously not being able to really be there to tell people what he thinks or what he would do in this situation. His influence is now out of his hands. But he is this, kind of chippy, charismatic leader figure that everyone looks up to. Also, he's, like, really insane. He's, like, mildly psychotic. When you consider how much he revels in murdering the nobility and does not feel any remorse for killing Ska who work for the nobility, he just has such a harsh black and white worldview because of what happened to him. Um, Seeing the way that he's forced to develop through learning from Vin, who, obviously learns from him because he's the mentor character, is real good. It's always good when the teacher learns something from the student. It's awesome. And, obviously he does so much peak shit in Mistborn, fighting the Inquisitor and whatnot. And then, honestly, a lot of the stuff with him in the other books, spoiler alert again, if you're still here for some reason, after he dies in the first book, is really good. Just sort of the lasting influence he is able to build as a person. Seeing the disconnect between people who followed him and people who were friends with him. Those who worship him and those who still sort of like look to him for guidance or example. I think the ones that I like the most, I can't remember who it was between. I also don't remember if this was towards the end of Well of Ascension or towards the start of Hero of Ages, where they were talking about how Kelsier used people for his own ends. They were ultimately tools for him. They danced upon strings that he held in his fingers, but people were always better off after he was done with them. He made them into better people through the ways that he used them. That was good. That hit. That is really, like, one of the most admirable ways I've heard a character described by others. And the other one that just kind of hit, is kind of like, damn, that made me emotional, is, Spook doing his stuff in Hero of Ages, him being peak, doubting himself, thinking about how he wasn't really left a role by Kelsier because everyone else was brought into the crew intentionally for a specific role in the job, but Spook was just kind of like a bonus that came along with clubs. What did he ever give to me? What did you ever entrust me with? I'm just Spooks. I gave you your name. You were my friend. Isn't that enough? That was a fucking gut punch there, man. Oh my god. What are some other things, some other characters and stuff that I like? Elend, awesome. Great arc. A very interesting arc. Elend is like kind of the most important character in the sense that he is the guy for what Sanderson actually was interested in doing for this trilogy, which was, of course, what are the consequences of overthrowing an evil, tyrannical dictatorship? How does establishing a new government work in a fantasy setting? Hold on, I gotta just get a sip of water. This is a lot of talking. My throat's getting dry. I haven't had to ramble this long in quite a bit. Oh yeah, I did want to mention if there's one thing for me to nitpick and complain about with Mistborn, the basic premise they sell the series on is just not accurate. It's just bullshit. What if the Dark Lord won? Yeah, that is not what these fucking books are about. Do not get it twisted. That is not what these are about. If anything, it's more like, what if the Chosen One turned out to be not a great guy? Even though that ends up not being what it is. Because, Alendi wasn't really the hero of ages. And neither was Rashek. Rashek was just there to murder him and then became the Lord Ruler. But, even then, it would be more accurate to say, what if the Chosen One was not a good person? What if the Chosen One decided to take over the world? Because they're the Chosen One. Because they can. That would be more accurate. And frankly, that's not like a big crazy revelation. You figure that out pretty early on into the first book. It becomes pretty obvious as soon as they start talking about how the Lord Ruler is the one who banished the deepness after he reached the Well of Ascension. It's like, oh, okay, he was the hero of ages then. Okay. So that premise is just not accurate. I get it was something that Sanderson had in his head for a while, and was probably something he had to do in order to get the publishers interested enough to actually let him release the books. Because that's the sort of generic thing that people love. People love generic slap shit. And that sounds like an interesting generic premise. I mean, I certainly thought it was interesting as a premise. It was not accurate, though. That's just not what the books are about. I also thought it was really interesting that he wasn't really interested in writing the first Mistborn book. He just kind of wanted to get to the stuff in Well of Ascension, but figured, I should probably write the setup first. I'm glad that he did, because I actually like the first book more than Well of Ascension. Not by much, but I prefer the formatting of it. I think just focusing on Vin and Kelsier, for the most part, as the two main points of view, made for a much simpler structure, which just made it like a more solid story. Whereas, when you get to Well of Ascension, we start going between like half a dozen different characters, and then we get like even more by the time we get into Hero of Ages. So I like the structure of the first book the most, and I like the content of the third book the most. I do think Hero of Ages is my favorite. Wow, that really went on a tangent there, huh? Here I was talking about Elend. Elend. Love this guy. He's the guy for, like, the main point of these books, which is, or at least the main point of Well of Ascension, which then carries over into Hero of Ages. What do we do after we overthrow a tyrannical dictatorship that's been around for 1,000 years? We don't know. We try to do what's right. And you know what's the problem? Doing what's right isn't always the best course of action. Sometimes you can't afford to be an idealist. Sometimes the situation does not allow for you to do what is most morally right or most morally comforting. Sometimes you need to take a strong hand. Sometimes you just have to go, I am the man in charge. I know what needs to be done. I am just gonna do it. And I'm not gonna wait for committee or democracy to get around to telling me this when a lot of people are not knowledgeable about things like I am, when people are manipulated about these things. I can't afford to let other people make the choice. I have to make the choice. Now, that's a very interesting lesson to take from that. It's a potentially dangerous point of view, but it's in line with some other interesting themes that Sanderson has in these books. Another interesting one is that sometimes the selfish choice is actually the correct one. Sometimes you should be selfish, which I think connects very much into that. The other obvious one being when you get to the Well of Ascension, you should make the selfish choice. Otherwise, if you release the power there, you will free Ruin from its prison. Which nobody knew about at the time, but, it can't really help these things. That's quite interesting. And Elend otherwise is, he's an interesting guy. He has an interesting arc of learning what it takes to be a leader, to be a king. I very much enjoy his relationship with Vin. They have a great romantic dynamic with each other. I grit my teeth and I clenched my fists at the misunderstandings they had in Well of Ascension. I was like, God damn it. This is what all problems stem from, is people not knowing how to fucking communicate with each other. God damn it. And you little bastard, Zane, trying to be a fucking homewrecker. You got what you deserved, you little shit. But then, everything that came about after that was obviously excellent. And then, Ellen gets to be a wife guy, which is the highest state of being a guy can reach. And because of this, we get some of the best parts of Hero of Ages, which is him and Vin at the ball. I loved all of that stuff. I love their banter. Oh, their banter is so good in that book. The way that Vin kind of gets jealous of the way other women are fawning over him because now he's all buff and bearded and dreamy looking. I liked him when he was a pathetic loser. Fuck you. Them finally dancing together. Oh, it was great. And I think the sort of ultimate takeaway from their relationship being when you love a person, you have to trust them. You need to have faith in them. And that can be really hard sometimes. And sometimes it's trusting them enough to let them go. To just let them do what they need to do and make peace with the fact that you may never see them again. Is great. They have a fantastic relationship with each other. It is one of the best parts of this trilogy. It's excellent. Love it. Sazed. What a great guy, honestly. Other than just being really cool in the first two books, you love him. Most reliable man around, can always count on Sazed. His crisis of faith in Hero of Ages is really interesting. I have not really seen a character arc like this before, and I can understand why Sanderson had such a hard time making it into something he actually liked. Because that's a really difficult thing to do. One, writing a character with depression in a way that's believable, and also in a way that would still be, interesting to read, is understandably really difficult to do. The other thing, it would be really hard to write his crisis of faith in a way that is not, pretentious. Because Sazed, he's realized that he preaches about all of these religions, but he doesn't really believe in any of them, and none of them have done anything really to help him. They haven't really done much of anything to help the world up until this point, as far as he can tell. And he wants to try and find truth in them. He wants to figure out which religion is the truth. That's a very difficult thing to do, because religions aren't based in truth, they're based on faith. They're based in believing in something beyond yourself and having the trust in that to just believe that things are going to be all right, that things are going to work out. And that's a really difficult thing to sell to some people. And doing a critique of religion as a person's arc, an incredibly cynical person's arc, is really hard to do in a way that doesn't come off as some r/atheist shit. His arc could have come off as being really annoying, of just this dumb anti-religious shit. And I say this as an agnostic person. I'm not a very religious person, but even I can understand that would probably be kind of grating if it were not well done. But Sanderson, from what I do understand, is Christian, at least. I think, is he a Mormon? I don't remember exactly what denomination he believes in, but I know he's a religious guy. So I imagine, obviously, that played into it quite a bit. I don't, this is weird, I'm not sure Sazed's arc could be well written by a guy who's an atheist. It is definitely a conclusion you have to come to, or to come to it, you have to be a person who has some kind of faith in something, really. Because it's not a scientific conclusion he comes to. It's just people need to have something they believe in. And so I'm just going to try to have faith in something. How reasonable of a conclusion is that? Not the most, but it's a very believable conclusion. It is kind of just like the end conclusion that probably a lot of people reach when it comes to religion. I don't know if this is true. I can't prove if this is true, but I want to believe in something, so I'm going to. Of course, there ends up being more to this once it's realized after the final battle. Oh yeah, I guess Sazed is the hero of ages. He meets all the criteria, kind of. I guess eunuchs are gender neutral. Per the Terrace prophecies, I guess. That all of the religions and their focuses, their studies, their beliefs, all carry within them some truth of the world. And all of them exist for some reason that can ultimately help to fix the world and return it to the way it is. I think that conclusion for Sazed was awesome. Just finding that sort of purpose to everything that he has learned about and remembered, and really doubting if there is any real reason for him to remember these things and teach them to anyone. It's all for this. It's all here so that you can fix the world with this truth and return things to the way that they were, because these faiths have remembered them to be this way. And not just religious faith, but also just faith in the world being better. You know, like with Marriage Picture. I really love that being included as like the cherry on top for all of the religions that Sazed talked about over the previous books. That was excellent. And I have to say, God, the payoff in these books is so good. It is so good whenever you get to the payoff in these books. Learning that the Lord Ruler is Rashek, that he's one of the Terracemen, learning about where the Well of Ascension is and what's inside of it. More so just sort of like, what the fuck is going on with the prophecies and all of the stuff from the past with the Terrace and whatnot? Oh, that would explain the inconsistencies and why everything was so confusing. Oh, okay. And then just kind of like a whole bunch of the shit that happens in Hero of Ages with, oh god, name any number of things, like with how hemalurgy works, or where the Khandra are, what happened to the Terrace, who the Hero of Ages is. It's so satisfying. And some of my favorite parts of reading these books was figuring stuff out. Even if, you know, it's being given to you without being told to you yet. I can't recall many other books I've read where I've had that experience. Like when Vin breaks into Kredikshaw after Kelsier dies and sees the Lord Ruler as like this old man. And I scratch my chin. I'm like, wait a second. This motherfucker's a ferrochemist, isn't he? Oh my god. And, you know, obviously that gets confirmed later when Vin realizes that. And then the stuff with hemalurgy in the third book. Realizing what the fuck happened to Spook. Oh. And then also realizing, oh wait, a metal spike lodged somewhere in your body. Vin's earring that her mother just kind of like stabbed into her ear after murdering her baby sister. That sure is interesting, ain't it? I really enjoy the way that Sanderson hints to and then reveals various revelations, various plot points and secrets within these books. It's fun. It's a really fun part of his formula for writing these. I hope it's something that he does in his other books too. I imagine so. because it sounds like his stuff has a bit of a formula to it. I understand that the last 100 pages or so of every Sanderson book is the Sanderlanche. It's 100 pages of the most insane shit happening. And it's definitely just sort of one of my favorite parts of how these books work. It's awesome. Let's see. Any other particular things I want to talk about? Boy, it sure does suck to be Marsh, doesn't it? Wow, does it fucking suck to be Marsh. That's crazy. I mean, I thought that he was gonna be like a cool, morally, mentally conflicted supporting character in Well of Ascension after the ending of the first book happened and he was still kind of hanging out. Nope. Nope. Marsh struggled to kill himself. What an opening line to a fucking book. What an opening line. Boy, I feel bad for that guy. But man, is he just involved in like some of the coolest shit. Honest to God. Like, everything Marsh is involved in after he becomes an Inquisitor is just like the coolest shit. Exploring the Inquisitor base with Sazed, fighting Sazed at the end of Well of Ascension, just sort of like just general insight every time we go to a Marsh POV chapter. It's just like, Jesus Christ. The Matrix Revolutions fight that Vin and all the Inquisitors get into in Creditshaw that there is somehow not a bunch of fan art of. What the fuck is up with that? There should be more fan art of these books, in my opinion. More fan art of the really cool shit. I need more of it. Also make more fan art of the big final battle that happens. The Avatar battle that happens between Elend and Marsh, with being imbued with the power of Vin and Ruin. It's such an awesome visual. It's like a mythological visual of what happens at this final battle. It's awesome. And there is barely any art of it. I think I have found like one piece of art for the two of them standing off against each other. I need more. Give me more Mistborn fan art to appreciate. Give it to me. I desire it. Also sucks for Marsh that he doesn't fucking die by the end of this trilogy. I'm gonna be curious as to what happens with him in Era 2. I think it's a safe assumption, especially based on the fact that Inquisitors take a long time to age. Though they can die of old age, they have extended lifespans. That motherfucker is going to show up in Era 2. I would bet my bottom dollar on that. I don't have very many dollars left, so you should take me seriously when I say that. I rub my hands together with curiosity and anticipation. Of course, it's going to be a little while till I get to reading Era 2. Per recommendation from my friend Matt, and also apparently Sanderson's own recommendation, I am reading Warbreaker right now. As I mentioned, I'm a little bit of the ways into it. And then I should read Stormlight before doing Era 2. Now, the Stormlight books are fucking gigantic. I am not sure I have ever actually read a book as long as The Way of Kings. I cannot recall reading a 1,000-page book at any point. I think the longest book I ever read, isn't Order of the Phoenix like 850 pages or something? Somehow, I read that over the course of like 3 days in the 3rd grade. I don't know what happened since then. I have no idea. But I think that will probably be the longest book I've ever read. And that is obviously a lot of time investment. And there are now 5 of these books out that keep getting longer. So if I'm not mistaken, I think there's about over 6,000 pages of Stormlight Archives out to read. At some point in those few thousand, I may decide to take a break from it and read Era 2. Especially also because Era 2 is done, and we're only, halfway through what he plans on writing for Stormlight? That's a long book series. That's a lot of pages. So we'll see what happens with that. However, again, I'm really loving these books. I'm really liking Sanderson's fantasy. I'm a big fan of it. I'm really liking this Cosmere stuff. So, assuming that they really strike home with me, I'll probably ramble about those too, in order to spare the people around me who are not nearly as interested in talking about it as I am. We'll see. We'll wait and see. But what do you guys think of Mistborn? Era 1, no spoilers for stuff that happens after or in any of the other books, but, be sure to tell me what you think about the books, because, well, another reason that I'm doing a video like this is to hear what other people have to say about something I like. That's part of the fun of rambling and discussing things with other people. I don't know, what are your favorite characters? What are your favorite parts of the books? What are your least favorite parts? Strath Venture is not a good character, but my god, is he funny. He is so fucking funny, isn't he? Oh my god. Just not beating around the bush with that guy at all. He is just a murderous, lecherous pedophile. What a guy. But yeah, with that, that's all I got for today's video. If you guys enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe. I'll probably put out some more videos talking about Sanderson's stuff in the future. And until next time, I'll see you guys around. Take care. Bye-bye.